of people. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
And actually, I'm going to
There's
start...
a lot of people here.
A lot, yes, and there's a balcony too. I'm going to start with
this is what it's like to be on stage. Now I know why I haven't done theatre.
I want to start with a note of congratulations because, as some of you know, today the Golden Globe nominations were announced, and well, I think they know already, but not only was the film you just saw, Little Children, nominated for Best Film in the Drama category, but as we all would have expected, for Best Actress in Drama, Kate Winslet.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. No, I'm absolutely thrilled. I'm really thrilled and kind of surprised too. You know, with a film like this, you never know how to gauge it when it comes to award season, you know, and it's important. It's really important when films are acknowledged and recognized in this way, because for something like Little Children, you know, it does hopefully mean that people will, you know, go and see it more. And,
absolutely. And it's a film that opened a little bit earlier than some of the other nominees, and in a way it just means that it might have that second wind, you know, the second life of people go, oh yeah, I didn't see that yet, and now I feel that I must. You know.
Well, exactly. No, it's you know, hopefully it will make something of a difference to the film.
I hope so. I wanted to first ask you whether you had read the novel by Tom Perrotta, because obviously what we've just seen tonight is an adaptation. And if you read the novel, did that affect your approach to playing Sarah?
Well, no, I hadn't read the book. I'd absolutely heard of the book, and I was a fan of Election, so I knew Tom's writing. But it sort of happened in a kind of a slightly back-to-front way. You know, ordinarily when a director is approaching an actor about a film, they'll send a script and sometimes an accompanying note with an explanation of why they would perhaps like that person to play the part. But what happened with me was my agent, who I've been with for 15 years, literally half my life, called and said that Todd had wanted to meet with me, and he didn't want to send a script. He just wanted to meet with me first. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And obviously I was a fan of In the Bedroom and knew Todd's work as an actor. And so we met and we sat and we talked for what was supposed to be half an hour and ended up being 2.5 hours. And he just told me the story and told me who he felt Sarah was. And he also did something that was quite brilliant, because it did wonders for the ego, where he told me why he thought I could play this part. And that had never really happened to me before, where I'd been, you know, in a position where the director was so articulate about what it was they genuinely felt I could bring to this person. And it was kind of extraordinary. I was very, very flattered. And some of what he said sort of stayed with me when I came to read the script. And then he gave me the script and said, okay, so now I'd love to know what you think. So I went away, and I was actually shooting the small part that I played in All the King's Men at the time down in New Orleans. And ordinarily, I find it very difficult to read other material whilst I'm working on something. I have to kind of just compartmentalize. But it was sort of sat there, and I thought, oh, I'm just 10 days away from finishing All the King's Men, and then I can read it. But just sneaky peek, and then I just read it. I just found myself reading. I was like, you know what, get over it. You've got to read this thing, and loved it immediately, and called Todd immediately, and just said, I would really, really love to play this part for you. The script was just incredible. I mean, I think you can tell from the film that, you know, the dialogue sort of doesn't feel like dialogue. It just feels like conversations that these people accidentally have, and a relationship they accidentally fall into, and that was what it read like on the page. And I really had never read something that was so real. It was so abstract and yet so incredibly real and powerful, just about love and human emotion and how people can be sometimes, and what happens to a person when they are so lonely in the way that Sarah was, and so isolated. You know, it can really start to make you think in ways that you didn't know were possible and you didn't know you had within you, and make decisions that are not decisions you thought you were capable of making. And there was something to me that was very striking and real about that. That was a long-winded answer, wasn't it?
No, it's... And then did you finally read the novel?
Well, then I did. Then Todd said to me, okay, read the screenplay. Do not read the book.
Oh,
and
he didn't want you to?
I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, no, just make sure you read the screenplay first. And then I still kind of don't want you to read the novel. And I just said, why? He said, well, you know, it is different to the book, and Sarah's a little different to the book, and he said, I don't know why, I just would rather you didn't. And of course I read the book immediately. Of course I read the book. And I'm so glad that I did. Most importantly because, you know, Sarah is at face value nothing like me. And certainly the world that she exists in is worlds away from my own. And she lives and breathes in a society that I have really never experienced before. And so just in terms of that, and in terms of the sort of underbelly of the story and all the other people in it, and the atmosphere surrounding those people, that was important for me to sort of learn about. And I wouldn't have sensed that so much, I don't think, if I hadn't have read the book. And there were a couple of things I took from the novel that I would say to Todd, please, can we just fit this in? We just squeeze this little moment in.
Such as?
The blue toenail polish.
Under the table, okay.
I'm sorry, that had to be in there because it's so, you know, bless her. She thinks that she's getting all a bit feminine and sexy, and she's just not at all. But she's sort of trying her best, and, you know, her little sort of stab at femininity is painting her toenails, but she paints them blue. It's like she can't even get that right, you know. It just was there was something so sweet and tragic about it.
And also because, if I remember at the very beginning of the film, Sarah is sort of colorless. You know, there's a sense in which, especially because there's no makeup and the clothes are kind of drab, so I can imagine how the touch of blue toenail polish for Sarah would have been something major.
Yes, no, it absolutely was. You know, I think she sort of thought she was being daring. You know, little did she realize that actually she was being far more daring in her own life. She didn't need to paint her toenails blue to prove it.
And speaking of reading books, I'm curious whether you had ever read Madame Bovary before doing the film, or did you in fact read it?
I absolutely had, but a really long time ago, you know, when I was sort of 14, 15 doing English literature at school. And I read it again. And, you know, it's an extraordinary piece.
Yeah, because during the book club, when you speak of the hunger, I mean, it's great acting on the one hand, but I also suspected that maybe you did, as Kate Winslet, understand that book too, because it's part of our, you know.
Well, yeah, lives. It's so much about a woman who is yearning to be free, and it's so much about passion and desire and also going insane through love and by love and because of it, and that is what happens to Sarah. And so the use of Madame Bovary as the book in the book group scene, I really thought was a stroke of genius, I have to say, on the part of Tom and Todd.
Yeah. Now, if the film had been only centered on the frustrated Sarah, her relationship with Brad, and the children, it still would have been, I think, a very strong, interesting film. But what makes it, for me, something much greater has to do with the last sequence and the way that the intersecting tales of Ronnie, of Larry, of every character in a way battling his or her demons, how it culminates in that park with Ronnie, the Jackie Earle Haley character. And one reason I'm raising this is I happened to see Little Children for the first time about, 6 weeks ago at a screening where afterwards Jackie Earle Haley and Tom Perrotta and a few others were present for a Q&A. And I was deeply moved to hear Jackie Earle Haley talking about you and the extent to which your generosity was made manifest, because if I understood correctly, though he didn't go into too much detail, you were instrumental in his getting the part. And I hope, I'm not sure if all of you realize that Jackie Earle Haley was a child actor. In Breaking Away, you know, he was a kid and he was the juvenile delinquent in the Bad News Bears, and then didn't act for many, many, many years. And then all of a sudden he's in All the King's Men in a small part, and the next thing you know, he is Ronnie here. And by the way, I mentioned to the audience that he won the Best Supporting Actor from the New York Film Critics.
Yes.
You were the one who sort of got him the audition, and if I understand correctly, asked to be part of the audition for him?
Do you want to know the story? I love stories like this. Well, what had happened was that Jackie had played Sugar Boy, a almost non-speaking role, although crucial role, in All the King's Men. He's kind of Sean Penn's sidekick. Now, when they came to casting that part, Steve Zalian was having terrible trouble with the physicality of who that person was going to be. And Sean had remembered Jackie from Bad News Bears. And they tried to track him down, which took months, apparently. He was very, very hard to find. He had not worked as an actor for 16 years and had gone through all kinds of, hideous, emotional, hellholes that out-of-work actors go through. But there he was, alive and well, and he played Sugar Boy. They asked him to play the part, and, he could not believe his luck even then. And then I got to know him a little bit, and he's the most dear person. I can't tell you, he's a really wonderful, wonderful human being. And Todd said to me one day after I had committed to Little Children, he said, "What do you know about this actor Jackie Earle Haley?" And I was like, oh my God. I said, are you thinking of him for Ronnie? Now, Jackie was not he was nothing like the images that Todd had in his mind of who was going to play Ronnie. And there were various sort of picture references that Todd had up on his wall in the production office here in New York. And they were just, images of what Ronnie was going to be. It was just not Jackie at all. And I said, oh my God, this is so exciting. This is so exciting. I cannot imagine anyone more physically perfect. And Todd said, yeah, well, is he a good actor? I said, he's a brilliant actor. He's a wonderful actor. Okay, right, just get on the phone and we're just going to get him to come here. We're just going to get him to come here, and we're going to, you're going to audition him, and I'm going to come, and we're going to audition him, and get him to do the scene on the swing set. I know he can do it, and I'm going to come up, and we're going to do it. He's going to be great. I was so excited. And it was pouring with rain here. I can't remember, it was June or July of 2005. And I couldn't find a cab. And I ran 25 blocks in the rain. I'm going to be late. So I'm running, making sure that I knew my lines for Jackie for the scene. So we get there, and I'm just this drowned rat, and Jackie's in the room kind of quivering with nerves. And he did the scene on the swing set, I'm not kidding you, almost as brilliantly as he does it in the film. It was the most earth-shattering audition I have ever been allowed to be a part of. He was incredible. And Todd looked at me, and then Todd looked at Jackie, and he just said, "Do you want the part?" Literally, like actor's dream, in the room, director offers you the job. And Jackie just dissolved into floods of tears. Actually, he fell to his knees, which was extraordinary. I mean, he suddenly was given his life back, And I seem to remember being a kind of a, blithering wreck as well. I was just so happy for him. That's
great. And I'm sure all of you know how rare it is for a star to do that kind of gesture, and to actually be there, to be, make sure that the audition happens right, because sometimes it doesn't happen at all for someone like that unless there is that kind of push. So,
well, I remember, when I was auditioning for Sense and Sensibility, oh God, it was so nerve-wracking, and and I so wanted that part, and I thought, well, they're never going to cast me because I've been told that I was much younger than they had imagined Marianne to be, and they'd wanted Marianne and Eleanor to be close in age, and Emma, who's one of my dearest friends, she is 14 years older than me. And so I thought, oh God, it's a long shot, I'm just going to really do my best, and just, saying my little prayers and writing my little, confidence notes to myself, on the train on the way up to London for my audition. And on the third recall, I walked into the room, and there was Ang Lee and Lindsay Duran, the producer, and Emma Thompson, and it was the first time I had met her. And she sat down next to me, and she said, "Hello, I'm Emma." And I said, "Hi, I'm Kate." And I could hear my heart beating, And she said, "You know what? Your top's grey." She said, "I've got a grey tank top underneath my cardigan. I'm gonna just for colour matching." And she took off her cardigan, and we had identical tops on, identical colour. I said, "It's good that our hair's the same colour too." She was like, "Anyway, okay, you ready?" And I said, "Yep." And then we did our audition, and I always remember thinking, that is so generous. You know, she put me completely at ease. She really made me feel as though she wanted me to get the part too. And that level of support is something that never leaves you, you know. And as an actor, that's all that you have, is the support of other people and the support you're able to give to other people. And the sense of team spirit is so crucial to me. I mean, I just can't live without that on a film set, because you do have to work together. You're all working towards the same end, and sometimes you're doing it with very, very little money. You know, I mean, Little Children was a decent budget, but it was still quite low for a film of this scale. And I just love that, you know, the sense of everyone working hard and trying to have a good time and having as many laughs as you can. And, you know, and Emma Thompson, honestly, she really sort of showed me the way. It was the first genuine example of just how to be as an actor that I ever had, and I'll always cherish it and always, you know, remember it, and hopefully be able to continue to share that, you know, where possible.
Oh, that's great. I mean, she was obviously already being your older sister, which she would play, but she took that seriously in life, and that has made you, I think, you know, a much more sharing kind of actor to those that you work with. You mentioned, you know, this community of feeling, and I feel like I wanted to ask you a question, though it's a bit silly. When I saw Little Children, I actually felt that it shared some of the canvas of American Beauty, a film that I thought was extraordinary in its richness.
Yeah, it was brilliant, wasn't it? American Beauty.
Yes, and let me just add that,
that?
because American Beauty happens to have been directed by Sam Mendes, the husband of Kate Winslet. I was just curious.
Yeah, clap.
I was curious whether he had any input in terms of your preparation for Sarah.
Are you kidding me? He knows better than to come anywhere near me when I'm working. I remember once there was a scene between Patrick Wilson and I, it was quite long. And I was trying to sort of get my lines under my belt, you know, a week before we were shooting it or something, and I basically knew them, but I just wanted to be absolutely 100% sure, and, you know, just sort of throw it away, leave it behind, so I could just concentrate on the performance and the dialect and all of those things. And I thought, God, I'm in a bit of a crunch here. Shit, I'm going to have to get him to test me. So I went to Sam and I said, right, you're going to have to test me on these lines. And he was like, ooh. And I said, no. I said, I'm just doing the lines, okay? I'm just doing the lines. You're not to comment. He's going, okay. Not to comment at all. No, I absolutely won't. So we start reading the scene, and I go, you know, I deliver a line, whatever it was, and I say, obviously, I'm not, you know, this is not how I'm going to do it. And he goes, no, I know. So I carry on doing the scene, and there's a pause, and I'm like, it's your line, it's Patrick's line. It's, you know. He said, I'm thinking. And I was like, what? What do you mean you're thinking? And he said, you know, there's another way to say that. I was like, oh my God! That is it. That's why I don't get you to test me on my lines. No, goodbye, and thank you very much. No, I don't. I've always sort of been, I think I've always been quite private about that process of putting together a person. And I don't, it's not like sort of my thing that I do or anything. It's very subconscious. And it started, I think, with Heavenly Creatures. I didn't even let my parents read the script. I was 17. I mean, I can't imagine that. If my daughter turned to me and was going off to New Zealand, you know, for 3 months to make a film, I would steal the script. I would sneak it. I would read it. I would do anything I could to get my hands on it. But I didn't. And somehow they were brilliant in respecting that and just sort of trusting me. And also, they were so thrilled. I mean, I was doing I got a part in a film. I mean, that didn't happen to members of my family. It was extraordinary. And that sort of just stayed with me, this sense of, you know, just keep it together, this sort of a quiet stillness that you have to have as an actor, because it's only you that you have to rely on, and at the end of the day, you have to know how to get back to that quiet place. And so the process of Sarah and putting her together was really hard, actually, really hard, because whilst I came to absolutely love her and understand her, initially I thought, oh my God, this woman. If I met her, you know, by a swing set, I would just go, I'd want to smack her, Wake up, woman, come on, pull yourself together. Because I'm very just practical. I'm like, get on with it. When the chips are down, you just pull yourself together and you dust yourself off and you carry on with life. And, Sarah was somebody who had been so entrenched in her loneliness for such a long time that she had lost all ability to figure out a way out of that. And in the birth of her child, I think that Sarah is somebody who didn't mean to have a child at that point in her life. She didn't even mean to marry the man she was married to. It was all kind of wrong from the word go. And so as a result, the biggest mistake she makes as a woman was in being unable to look into the eyes of her child and realize that that was the single most thing that was going to make her happy and change her life. But she couldn't do that. She saw that child as somebody who was proving to be a barrier from who she ultimately wanted to be, But she'd sort of forgotten who that person that she wanted to be was anyway. She was so tangled up in her own loneliness. And that was hard, coming to understand why that was. So I had to really sort of dig back into a past that I sort of created for her, that was all to do with relationships and family and heartbreak, and I just had to have that sort of a blueprint history for myself of who she was, so that everything she did was in my mind for a reason. I'd go, oh, okay, right, so I know why she's married the wrong man. That's because of this thing that I planned happened to her when she was 18. But it sounds very sort of actory thing to do, but it was so important that I had that for Sarah, just because there were so many things about her that I didn't particularly respect. And ultimately, I just had to learn to love her, a bit like embracing a relation who, you don't have to see all the time and makes you feel rather uncomfortable. It was like, here's the relation you don't like spending time with. Guess what? You got to live with her for 3 months, every day. And I did end up ultimately, just adoring who she was, thank God.
Yeah, I can imagine, because, when I looked over your filmography and thought about your work, I found it curious that despite your relative youth, at least 4 of your major films, you've played mothers already. Mothers usually, Meryl Streep will play a mother, Sigourney Weaver these days, but not somebody your age. And when I thought about it, in Finding Neverland, you have 4. Mm-hmm. In Hideous Kinky, the 2 daughters. In Jude, quite a few children. And then here. And I was wondering if it was coincidental or whether, in fact, you do gravitate towards scripts where the maternal instinct, or lack of it, might be the focus.
I don't know if I necessarily gravitate towards them. I think now that I do have kids of my own, I subconsciously absolutely do, just because, being a mother is so extraordinary, but it's also so different for every single parent. And so, and there's no right way to be a parent. You can just all do the best you can and hope that you're raising small children who are going to be nice and happy. Eric Goldstein. Sadie May, who plays Lucy, her dad and mum are in the house. And Eric was expressing to me that their only hope for Sadie is that she's nice and happy, or was it happy and nice? It was one way around. But that is all that you do hope for your children. And when you read scripts and there's a role there that's a mother, yes, I am interested to see what type of a parent that person is going to be, obviously, and also what their plight is as a character, why they're there, what they're doing in that piece, and what their story is. But I think when I was younger, Jude was a brilliant script written by Hussein Amini, who, first of all, I just thought, how has somebody had the guts and courage to do an adaptation of Jude the Obscure, which is the most depressing novel on the face of the earth? I thought, how is this going to work, and read it and just was completely blown away. And then it sort of occurred to me after the event, oh my God, Sue's a mother. She really is a mother. She's a stepmother and a biological mother. And I was 20 when I played that part. And it was terrifying, and those awful scenes when the children dying, and it's awful. I look back and I think, what was I thinking? But without question, I think the subject of mothers in general is an eternally fascinating one, and it's one of the themes I think that springs out sort of surprisingly in little children. You look at the relationship that Ronnie has with his mother. It's just incredible. She just I mean, talk about love. Yeah. What extraordinary dedication and
unconditional love.
Unconditional love. And it's one of the things that makes that story, that part of Little Children, so heartbreaking, is that, you know, that mother gives her son confidence in some way to find himself again and give him confidence that somehow he is going to be able to carry on through life in spite of this awful disorder. And she also makes him realize that he would do absolutely anything he could to not be the person that he is. But she'll love him no matter what he is. I mean, it's remarkable. Yeah,
I agree. In terms of choosing projects, because I read, and perhaps this is true, that you turned down some major films like Shakespeare in Love, for example.
I never said that.
I read it somewhere. I don't know if it's true, but that you had your choice after Titanic of any number of wonderful scripts and projects, and yet you chose, for example, Hideous Kinky and Holy Smoke. Rather, well, I'm not saying that you turned down Shakespeare in Love, but I read that Anna and the King, you know, that there were projects that were either directly or indirectly offered to you. I mean, what is the basis, whether in general or in particular? Is it more often a function of the screenplay, or sometimes the director, the opportunity to work with certain actors, or is it an intuitive thing?
It is, to be honest with you, it is, well, I don't want to say it changes all the time, because it doesn't. The only way I can describe it is like a fire in the belly. It's like oh, yes. It's a really instant thing. And it doesn't, it sort of doesn't matter to me what size a budget is, or, you know, how many other big names are going to be in it. I mean, it's always wonderful when you're casting something and all of a sudden, you know, you're alongside somebody like Patrick Wilson. You know, I mean, it's a great gift, or Johnny Depp for that matter, which is also a great gift. Oh yes. Better looking in the flesh, girls, by the way. Believe it or not. Sick, isn't it? But, you know, I mean, certainly, just to go back to, you know, Hideous Kinky and Holy Smoke, you know, those, Hideous Kinky, quite honestly, saved my life. I mean, it really did. Because when Titanic came out, I turned 21 whilst we were shooting that film, and people would say to me, what are you going to do? Your life is going to completely change. And I'd say, no, it's not. No, it's not. What are you talking about? Of course my life's not going to change. And they go, oh, come on. And I go, well, what do you mean, come on? Of course it's not going to change. And of course it did. It did, sort of almost overnight. And I was in denial about that too. I just thought, I'm not going to let this happen. I've got to, you know, I want to hang on to who I am. I want to live in my little flat in North London, and I want to go and buy a pint of milk in my pajama bottoms and not to be photographed by 25 people when I'm doing it. You know, it was completely bizarre. And I just realized very quickly two things. One was, oh my God, I really love my job. And the other thing was, oh my God, I always want to really love my job. And I think that I wasn't really ready. I honestly wasn't ready to be so shunted into the public eye so consistently. You know, Titanic was one big burst of that. But then I knew I had to get back to me. I mean, I just had to do that. It wasn't even a question. It was just, well, you know, you have to, and how are you going to? And the way I sort of managed to navigate my way through that was to do Hideous Kinky, because I thought I just need to go away and do the thing that I care about the most, and it was that script. I loved that over all of the other things that were suddenly, you know, coming in, and it was just a glorious experience. You know, it was made for £2 million total budget in Morocco, and you know, I got to go on an adventure, a real adventure that took me completely outside of what I was experiencing in my own real life, which was all of that fame so suddenly, which I wasn't prepared for and didn't know how to cope with, really did not know how to cope with. I thought I did at the time, but I don't think I did. And so, you know, I think Hideous Kinky, you know, probably ended up being my big night in a nightclub, you know, that some people would go on, you know, some huge, you know, drinking spree or something like that, which I just never did. I managed to avoid that whole world, thank God, much to my parents' joy. I managed to avoid all of that stuff.
And then you went and did Jane Campion's film, Holy Smoke, which I remember seeing at the New York Film Festival and thinking, this is one fearless actress. Because, after Titanic, it was unclear, where you would go, because you were very young, the youngest, to have 2 Oscar nominations at the time. And then Holy Smoke, where you had nude scenes, and even one scene that I'll never forget, where you're actually, urinating in front of the camera, and I thought, this is amazing. This is a gutsy actress who seems to have no fear. I mean, how did you work with Jane Campion, and did it sort of change you as a human being? I mean, playing that kind of a part, did you find areas of strength and brazenness that you didn't even know you had?
I don't know. I suppose I think I probably did. I mean, I've always been quite ballsy, I think is the word.
That works.
I've always been quite strong and strong-willed, quite determined, but not determined in a sort of careerist way, just determined about emotions and things and passion and life, and very adventurous as well. And so I think something like Holy Smoke, it was such an incredible opportunity. And by the way, I went and properly auditioned for that, several times, and was so happy to be in that position, to go and improvise with Harvey and Jane, for sometimes 2-3 hours at a stretch. It was incredible.
And I'm just going to remind you that Jane Campion had previously directed Harvey Keitel and Holly Hunter in The Piano.
In The Piano, yeah.
So although the 2 films, I think, are very different in tone, this is a very strong director from Australia.
Yes, Jane was just brilliant. And I felt incredibly supported by her. And blessed also, because in a way I came to realize as we were shooting the film, she'd actually sort of written about her younger self. In some way, Ruth was Jane in a camper van going adventuring around India, but that whole experience was just entirely about being brave. It really was. I mean, we were out in the middle of the Red Sand Desert in Australia, for 3.5 months. And it was really nerve-wracking, but you overcome nerves by just getting on with it. You just have to. And as an actor, you literally have no choice, especially when, if you're nervous, it just shows on your face, in your eyes, everything. And I've always said, I think, that acting it's literally, I believe, 50% skill and 50% confidence. And sometimes the confidence part comes before the skill part, just because you have to emotionally get yourself there to the point where you can say, okay, I'm going to jump off this diving board and hopefully I won't drown. Sometimes you really do have to say that to yourself.
Actually, I'm reminded of your very first appearance, because I last night was watching the beginning of Heavenly Creatures, and you were 17, and the confidence with which you walk into the classroom for the first time, I couldn't believe that it was the first screen appearance for you. The character had to have that, of course, but one sensed that you yourself had that, and that's why you got the part.
Well, I think I was determined that I was going to get that part. In the way that I think a lot of actors are, even when they're going up for a commercial, you're just determined you're going to get that job. And that was how I felt about that. Not only because of, I didn't know who Peter Jackson was. I had no idea, and not many people did, I think, at the time.
I don't think he was very well known.
No, absolutely not. And I read the script and could not believe that I was being asked to read a film script. Like I said before, this was not something that happened in our lives at all. And went for several auditions, 3, 4, I think even 5 callbacks. And I just could not let it go. It was I was really living it every single day. I would walk around thinking about the character, thinking about the film, this longing, this unbelievable, just desperation and determination to get that part. And a long time went by after my last recall. I remember that, a long time, like 7 weeks, and literally no one had heard anything at all. And I was working in my part-time job that I used to do in a delicatessen, and I was in the middle of slicing pastrami. And I honestly was, excuse me, and the phone rang in the office in the back, and I don't know what it was, but I absolutely knew the phone was for me. And I went, I just knew the phone was, I don't know why, I don't know, one of my very few psychic moments, I just knew. And my boss said, Kate, phone for you. So I ran almost in sort of slow motion to the phone, thinking, is this it? Is this my phone call? Is this my phone call? And there was my agent on the end of the phone. She said, who's a clever girl then? And I went, oh my God, you know, joy dance. I had to leave work immediately. Poor bloke never got his pastrami. I had to leave immediately. Didn't have the money for the bus and just, you know, ran all the way home, dancing down the street. And I still get like that, you know. I mean, just this morning, getting the Golden Globe nomination, leaping about like a child. It never goes away, and thank God I never get used to it. Thank God. Can you imagine? It wouldn't be the same. It's so exciting.
And it comes through. I mean, I think that the way that you inhabit these characters, the way that you make them live for us, the authenticity, and sometimes, you know, I forget that you have wonderful comic gifts, because very often, you know, I'll remember a certain actor or actress in terms of this role and this role, and I think of, you know, Jude and little children, and then I'll forget the holiday. I mean, I just went this past weekend, you know, we went to a theater with the normal people, with a big audience, 2nd Avenue and 64th Street, sold out house. And everybody was laughing, and you were so funny.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I thought, well, you know, isn't this wonderful that, you know, you don't have to just be limited to dramatic parts. And actually, one of the things I loved about it, which I wanted to ask you, I'm a big fan of the actor Jack Black, but I have never thought of him as a romantic lead.
No,
And,
not me.
And the scenes between you and him actually worked. And I wondered
Don't
whether...
sound so surprised.
No, just...
No, I'm kidding.
I just mean that Jack Black is such a riotous character who doesn't even leave room in the frame psychologically for me for some girl or anything. He is his whole universe, because
Yeah.
he riffs and does things like
Yeah.
that. Did you audition with him? I mean, was it clear from auditions, or was it in rehearsal that a certain complicity developed? Because I think Nancy Meyers, who wrote and directed it, and her previous film was Something's Gotta Give, it was a very unusual kind of casting. I mean, you can imagine Cameron Diaz and Jude Law pretty easily, but had you told me a year ago Kate Winslet and Jack Black, I would have said, oh, please. So I'm just curious about that.
Well, when I read the script, you know, I said to Nancy, okay, who are you getting for Miles? And she said, well, who do you think? And I said, I only see Jack Black. And she said, oh, I'm so excited, me too. And so that was it. It was just always Jack, and we were just, I mean, unbelievably lucky that he said yes. He's incredible to work with, incredible. But he's also a nightmare, because he willfully tried to make me laugh. In every single, you know, I'd be doing something very serious and important, I thought, and he would just, you know, flick an eyebrow up or something, you know, and I would just go. There's a gag reel that exists. I've never had my own gag reel before. I was very excited, and there's a gag reel which is all entirely Jack Black making me laugh, and me going, please stop, just let me do one, just please let me just get through one. He'd go, okay, I'm really sorry, and then again he'd do the same thing. But he's absolutely brilliant. He's such a genius.
Someday maybe we'll have him here in Real Pieces, because I think he is genuinely a very, very talented actor.
He's brilliant.
I'm curious, because you've done 17 features already, if I counted correctly, and with some really gifted directors. I mean, we've talked backstage about the fact that Philip Kaufman's my favorite director, but you've also worked, when I think about it, Jane Campion and Nancy Meyers, in terms of the female directors who've actually managed to get their films made, James Cameron, Ang Lee, Mark Forster, and now Todd Field. I'm curious whether there are particular directors who you feel have enabled you to give the best of yourself, and in what sense? I mean, whether it is in terms of rehearsal process, or the way they give you confidence or inspire confidence. You know, is there any particular memory that you have that you think this is what great directing's all about?
Working with Richard Eyre, who directed Iris. That was a pretty defining moment for me. I mean, also, you know, look, I mean, working with Peter Jackson, that was my introduction to everything. I mean, he just let us be completely outrageous, and he encouraged it, you know, absolutely encouraged it. And if we were doing a scene where we had to be dancing and skipping down a street, he would say to us, okay, girls, here's what I want you to do. And he would dance and skip down the street for us, you know, pulling silly faces and waving his arms in the air, and just being completely free. So I think from the very beginning, I was allowed to express myself in a way that was completely natural. And I just didn't have to think twice about it. I didn't have to think about being stared at by a crew of people I'd never met. Peter wasn't worried, so why should I be? And that really did stay with me. But then when I worked with Ang Lee, he had to sort of rein some of that in, because obviously Sense and Sensibility, is a much more sort of controlled and sort of tailored film. And the emotions are something that, they're just underneath the surface. And when they come above the surface, it's very, very powerful. And that's what Ang Lee is brilliant at, is getting people to absolutely find those characters and sit on them for a long, long time. So that was an enormous education for me too, because I literally had to have somebody put the brakes on my behalf. But then working with Richard Eyre, I think up until that point, I'd never really considered myself particularly intelligent. I'd never considered myself to be, well-read, certainly not classically trained. I wasn't really trained at all. And I was very aware as well that people, and I think this happens a lot with British actors, is that people often assume that we are trained, all of us, and we've done speech lessons and posture lessons and, poetry recitals, and we've been taught how to project and speak, and okay, not me. I wasn't that lucky. And so when I came to work with Richard, I was very, very nervous, because I thought, oh crap, now he really thinks I'm one of these intelligent knives. And obviously I was playing Iris Murdoch, and that was some huge thing to have to try and pull off, especially when Judi Dench is playing the older version of yourself. I mean, talk about pressure. So, but Richard just absolutely made me feel like a goddess. I mean, he was just fantastic, but also incredibly direct, which I love, and I love being told the truth. I mean, Richard would come to me and he would say, after a take that I had thought was, sort of okay, I'd be like, oh, that was a good one, wasn't it? And he'd come up and he'd say, that was dreadful. And I'd go, oh, okay, what do you want me to do? And he'd say, well, I want you to do it better. And I'd think, okay, Richard Eyre, I'll do it better, and I love that. So there was something about that experience specifically that really made me just go, pull your socks up, get on with it, absolutely, do it better. Yeah, I will do it better, and I'll keep trying to do it better. And then another key moment for me was working with Michel Gondry, who directed Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, because he just let me be, and he encouraged me to just improvise and experiment with things, and it was just a case of anything goes, just try it, we'll see, absolutely do it, which gave me tremendous confidence when playing a character with an American dialect. It really did. It made me feel very free in that world, in that environment, playing those people, which was completely crucial, I think, to in coming to Little Children, because I had a confidence in doing an American accent and in improvising within it and just not worrying. I mean, it's funny when you do a different dialect for a film, because on the first day of shooting you open your mouth and all you think is, the crew are all American and they're all listening to me and they're thinking that I'm terrible, and it takes a lot to get over that. And it was just Eternal Sunshine, it was just gone, obliterated. That fear completely disappeared, and that made a big difference with Little Children, because the experience was so emotionally tough that if I wasn't confident, I can't imagine what would have happened. And we all had to feel like that. We just had to feel as though we could do it, and to be determined to just get through,
Sure. And by the way, if you want to see another example of Richard Eyre's magnificent direction of actors, his film Notes on a Scandal
which
is
opening
amazing. In the next 2 weeks, starring Judi Dench and Cate Blanchett, both at the top of their form.
It's incredible. It really is
very,
incredible.
very powerful film. Improvising on the set of Eternal Sunshine, I imagine, with Jim Carrey is probably an experience of its own, not just improvising for Michel Gondry. Mm-hmm. But did you find that he upped the ante with you in terms of improvisation, or, if I heard correctly, that he stuck more to the script here because it was more of a dramatic part?
Jim did, interestingly, Jim did like to stick to the script, which was absolutely fine. And sometimes if we would improvise together, which did happen a lot too, he would always be very gracious about that and would absolutely improvise, but would always quite quickly pull it back to the script, because I think that was where he felt really safe in playing that character. He was playing somebody quite unlike anything else he'd ever done before, and I actually personally think it's his finest hour. I really do. I thought he was so wonderful in the movie. And so in order to sort of remain as contained as I think he needed to be in playing Joel, the script was really important to him, whereas Clementine was all about surprises and all about spontaneity and all about just being wild and hideous sometimes. And so Michelle would really push me to do as much of that as possible. But actually it sort of balanced itself out quite well. I mean, it was never something that was difficult or anything like that.
No. And it's one of those intricate films. When I first saw Eternal Sunshine, I was positive I had missed so much, and I wasn't sure I liked it that much. And I went back and saw it a second time, and it all started coming together in my head, and I realized on second viewing that it was one of the most brilliant scripts, and that the acting was on such a high level, so that I finally was able to gauge myself in relationship to the time frames.
Yeah, it is a curious film. I mean, you wanted to have been during that shoot. The shoot was just, God, it was insane. There were some days when I would think, I literally don't know what scene I'm in. I mean, I can't remember. Is it a memory that's being erased whilst we're in the scene, or is it a memory that is from Joel's past, or is it even from Clementine's past, or are we talking about a bit of the film that hasn't even happened yet? And my script, actually I found it the other day. I was going through some stuff and I found it, and I was like, oh my God. And it's almost as though I've drawn graphs, on each page with, all different color pens and Post-its and diagrams and, my own little way of trying to understand it all. But I hadn't realized quite how mad the experience had been until I found the script. I was like, oh my God, I must have been nuts when I was making this film. And I think I was, actually.
It's a challenge for an actor to do that. I realized that I have so many more questions, and I've been asking quite a few so far.
I give long answers. I do apologize.
No,
Please feel
it's
free,
not
anybody,
that.
if you
I'm just
need
having
to go.
so much fun listening. So I know there are questions, and I know also we have to allow for a moment when those who have to rush to their cars and babysitters and whatever, we'll give them a moment to do so quickly and quietly. But then I see one hand here, one here, a gentleman here.
Oh, they're all going.
No. Only those who have to. And then there are those from the back who are moving quickly up to the front to take their seats.
No, they're actually all going.
No, they're not. Trust me. Those who stay are the ones that you'll enjoy it at the end. Okay, and we still have the balcony too. Okay, yes, I'll repeat it. Where do you think that your determination comes from?
I've absolutely no idea. No, let me see. How can I answer that? I think my parents, who are not necessarily particularly determined individuals, they're very real people. They don't live with their head in the clouds at all. I grew up, as I was saying before, in a family of actors, and it was always a struggle for everyone, always. And most of the time people were out of work. But they loved it. They absolutely loved it, no matter what. But my parents, I think, just really encouraged us all to just absolutely be ourselves, to be who we were, and loved us, just completely loved us. So I always felt safe. I always felt as though I was trusted and that anything was possible. And it wasn't a case of, I could do no wrong in their eyes, because, trust me, I'm sure I absolutely did many wrong things. But somehow they really did empower us to just be our own bosses. And I think that's the best way I could possibly answer that question.
It's good. Yes.
Are there any roles that you didn't accept or that weren't offered to you that really wish you had the chance to play?
There's only one.
I'll just repeat it. Are there any roles that you either turned down or weren't offered to play that you're really sorry and wished you could play?
I don't. First of all, I'm just a person who does not believe in regrets at all. So, in turning roles down, I've just gone, okay, move on. And I've always been absolutely delighted to see other people, play those roles brilliantly. But there's only one role that I'm sadly now absolutely too old to play that I would have literally cut my right arm off to play, and that is Abigail Williams in The Crucible. I absolutely have had an obsession with that play since I was a 13-year-old girl. And my English literature teacher walked into our classroom one day late and just said, "Everybody sit down." And he set the play on all of our desks. He said, "This is what we're doing today. Kate, you're reading Abigail." And I was like, "What is this? What do you mean, Abigail?" And immediately I was like, "Oh, is it the lead?" And I was like flicking through and I was like, "Oh, it is actually kind of the lead," you know. And I just have always been completely obsessed. I did it for my drama GCSE, which is the big exams we do in England when you're 16. And I was in a group of 6 girls, and they were all like, "Oh God, not The Crucible." And I was so determined. I was like, "Look, it's so great. You know, it's about this, and it's about passion and friendship and determination, and you know." And convinced them all to do it. So we did, and we all got straight A's. I was so happy. I was so happy. So that's honestly the only part. It's an incredible role. But you know, you really have to be 18. I'm 31 now.
Gentleman here.
I want to say that I think you should have won the Oscar for Titanic.
Oh, thank you.
First, I think you should have won the Oscar for Titanic, and hope you win the Oscar for this film.
And when you were preparing to play Ophelia, were you influenced by any other actress that you had seen in that part? And if so, how did it influence your performance?
When you were preparing to play Ophelia in Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet, were you influenced by any other actresses who had played that part?
I deliberately didn't rush out and see a bunch of Ophelias. I just thought, you know what, it's going to make me more nervous than I already am. It's going to make me panic about the fact that everyone else was better than I'll ever be. And so I just didn't. And I just tried to play her in my own way. I mean, Ophelia is a really difficult part because she's so underwritten. I mean, just everything about her happens between the lines. And I thought that Kenneth Branagh actually did a really wonderful job in trying to support the love story between Hamlet and Ophelia in some flashbacks that he used, which I thought were absolutely crucial. I really do, because you really do get to see how much she loved him. She really, really loved him, and she was driven insane through that love that she had for Hamlet. And you often don't really sense that as much. So the mad scenes at the end with Ophelia, I sometimes feel don't always make as much sense. Not necessarily to say that the ones that I was in did make sense, but I certainly think that what Ken did in supporting Ophelia's sort of small story made a big difference. But that whole experience was unbelievable and terrifying. I mean, you know, you sit around a table on first day of rehearsals and you're looking at Derek Jacobi and you're looking at Julie Christie and you're looking at Kenneth Branagh and you're looking at yourself and going, but I'm only 19. I'm not supposed to be here and I'm going to get fired as soon as I open my mouth. And that was how I felt on that film. But they were all amazing. They were, you know, all those actors were incredibly encouraging and supportive, and we'd all test each other on lines, and it was a really amazing experience for me.
Okay. Question over there?
You have 2 children, celebrities like Angelina Jolie or Madonna, they adopted children. What do you think about that, and did you ever have the idea to adopt?
This is not exactly a question about the work, which is what we usually do here, but based on the fact that Angelina Jolie and Madonna have adopted children, do you have any opinion about that? Have you ever thought of adopting?
I personally have not thought of adopting children, no, and I just feel very blessed that biologically and physically I am able to have children of my own.
Question in the back there, yes?
In this film, Little Children, was the voiceover always meant to be part of the movie? Was that always written into the script as an actual role? And was that something the director decided to add in as he was cutting it? And who was the voice?
The question is about the intermittent voiceover narration in Little Children. Was that voiceover always part of the script as written? Was it added after a certain point? And whose voice was it that we were hearing?
The voice was where have you gone? I can't see you. Yeah,
right.
Hi. The voice was always there, and in actual fact, it was called the voice. It wasn't narrator or narration or voiceover. It was the voice. And initially, it was one of the things I was really puzzled by when I read the script. I said to Todd, how's this going to be? What is this thing, this voice? How's that going to work? Is it? And I was sort of nervous about it, to be honest, because sometimes I think that voiceover or narration can often be a very lazy way of storytelling. And I didn't feel that it was lazy in terms of how it was scripted. I didn't at all. But, it's one of those things where the voice is crucial. If it had been a sort of a soft-spoken English person, no, wouldn't have carried as much weight. Just wouldn't. So it was always there. And the reason behind it is quite specific. It was something that Todd Field wanted to bring into the film from the novel, because Tom Perotta's own voice within the book is quite profound in terms of the telling of the story. And so that was where the idea kind of came from. And the voice is a man called Will Lyman from Frontline. And it was always going to be him. Todd said, if he's not available, we're scrapping the voice. It was always going to be Will Lyman. It was something that Todd was absolutely fixated with. And I remember the first time that we heard the voice too. We were on set. We were a couple of weeks into shooting, and sometimes for timing of scenes, or timing how long a scene was going to be, which often doesn't happen on a film. A scene takes as long as it takes, and then they'll trim around it in the editing room. But sometimes if it was a scene that was bookended with the voice, the timing of it, this is such a technical, long-winded way of saying that basically if a scene had been 22 seconds, it was not a good thing, because sometimes it needed to be 18 and a half. So Todd would often play the voice in headphones to himself, and there was one day when the sound mixer forgot to plug the headphones in, and Todd had not really wanted us to hear the voice at any point. So this voice came out, and Patrick and I were mid-conversation. We were like, I was like, oh yeah, so anyway, Mia's constipated at the moment. Oh my God, is that the voice? That's the voice, that's the voice. And it was so loud, and it was just incredible. And when I heard it, I was like, okay, now I know what film I'm in. It was like, it was a real penny drop moment for me. It just all came together. I sort of understood what I was a part of. So there we go.
Well, and actually, for those who've read Madame Bovary, in a way, that novel is, as I know from my mother who teaches French literature, but that novel, the narrator, that voice is crucial to establishing the tone, because there's a kind of satiric distance at times, but also a sympathy. In other words, you get to go inside of Sarah to some extent, and the Prom King at the beginning, only because that voice, in its kind of dispassionate way, brings you inside. And without it, I can't imagine the tone of the film being the same.
Yeah, I agree. And I also like the fact that it just gives you information and lets you think for yourself. It doesn't tell you what to be thinking as an audience, which often I think narration can do. That's right. And it doesn't do that. It comments upon what's happening to these people, which I think is very clever.
Yeah, I agree. We have a woman on the island. And
Also, sorry, I have to say one more thing about the voice. Another thing that was very important to Todd, that I think works brilliantly, is that the voice comments upon every single character except Ronnie. Makes no comment whatsoever about Ronnie. And there was a specific reason for that. It was because Todd always really felt that if there was any danger of an audience feeling as though they were being told how to feel with regards to these characters, he did not want that to happen with Ronnie. He wanted for the audience to absolutely decide for themselves, and for that character to be shrouded in as much mystery as possible. And I actually think he really pulled that off, and I think it worked tremendously in not having the voice comment upon Ronnie's character.
Especially because the very beginning of the film is the news, the so-called newsreel footage, the TV news of Ronnie. That's Ronnie's voice in a way. It's the commentary on him that comes from outside, but it's not the man's voice, it's the images with the people speaking.
Yeah.
The woman on the aisle back there?
Sarah had a real knack for alienating everybody she came in touch with, but she did have one woman friend. And the woman friend babysat for her daughter. Why was that woman so quick to condemn her?
Question about the character of Jeannie, I think it is. In other words, that Sarah alienates almost everyone she comes in contact with, but has this one really good woman friend who babysits. What turns that woman? Why does she leave in such a huff?
It's really interesting that you asked that question, because a lot of people do, and for me, I know absolutely why, and so I'm always kind of puzzled by it, so I'm going to really try and answer the question for you. I have had friends who have had affairs and who have done bad things, close friends, people I know very well. And don't you just know? Can't you just tell? There's something about it. There's something about when a friend is not quite themselves, acting differently, behaving in a different way. You just know. But more importantly, you know, when Sarah comes back from that breakaway with Brad, you know, the room that she first walks into, her daughter's made a huge, great big welcome home mummy sign. She doesn't go into the room. She doesn't go, oh, wow. She doesn't look at the sign. She goes to the back door. She goes in the room. She doesn't say, oh, Jean, where's my baby? Where's Lucy? Is she okay? She doesn't say anything. She doesn't ask her anything about her child. And also Sarah looks a little fresher. You know, she's got a little white cardigan on, she's got little suntan marks, you know, a little bit of lipstick even. And I think Jean just knows. And then she tries to pay her off. For the first time ever, she tries to give her money. And I mean, wouldn't you be able to tell something had gone on? And to me, it's quite clear, but often people do ask this question, and I think that's why. That's why I think Jean's heard about the kiss at the swing set. She's, you know, she knows something's up with Sarah. She absolutely knows. But I think perhaps if the character of Jean, if you saw more of her as a character, if she physically had more scenes, maybe it would be slightly more clearer for the people who do have trouble with that area, perhaps. But it's always been quite clear to me. But then I'm in the films.
Gentleman over there, and soon we're going to have to wind up. Yes?
I just wanted to know, can you talk a little bit about your experience working with Jennifer Connelly? Because, I mean, in my own opinion, I think you two are two of the best young actresses working right now. And to see, you know, the two of you together was like a real, you know, treat for me.
Can you talk a little about working with Jennifer Connelly? Because as the gentleman says, you're two of the finest young actresses working today.
Thank you very much for that incredible compliment. I hold Jennifer in the highest regard, and I feel that we were incredibly lucky that she played this part. It's a supporting role, very much a supporting role. She's won an Academy Award, and I thought that was just so generous and remarkable of her to be involved with this piece, because she just loved the script and loved the story. But to be honest with you, I worked with her for one day. So, you know, we had that dinner party scene when we're all together in the room, and literally that was it, which was such a shame, you know. But she's a great person. I know that she's a wonderful mother, and I too think she's a brilliant actress.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in both cases, but hers more so, it's not a sympathetic character as written, as directed, or as performed. And for someone of that stature to take on a small part where you also don't have the audience's sympathy, that's, you know, I think that's rising to challenges, you know, for you and for her.
Well, absolutely, and I think it's, you know, it is important as an actor when you are in a blessed position where you get to choose what you do. I think it's important to play characters sometimes who you run the risk of the audience not necessarily liking the person. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be giving a decent performance, but, you know, people aren't always nice. People aren't always what you want for them to be or hope they might turn out to be. And that's what makes it much more challenging. And that, for me, was very much the case with Sarah.
Well, I think little children in general, I mean, almost all of the characters are deeply flawed. I mean, I can't think of a heroic, in quotes, character in the film, at least not in the major parts. And I suspect that artists like Todd Field and yourself make films precisely to widen the sympathies of the viewers. In other words, whether we're reading a book or watching a film, it would be too easy if we could complacently just go, oh yeah, I like this character, I can identify with what's wonderful about them. In fact, what we identify with is the darker places where we're not exactly living up to our expectations, whether from the past or the present. And I think this film succeeds in making us care in ways we didn't think we would when the film begins.
And it also makes you laugh when you don't know whether you're supposed to be laughing or not.
That's right. Well, I heard at the beginning of the film, everybody was laughing here. And of course, the film goes darker and darker, and the laughs are fewer and far between. And that's, I think, a very effective narrative strategy, certainly on the part of the writers and director, to pull us in and then disorient us so that we're made to rethink our feelings for the characters. I mean, I suspect that for you, it was hard-earned sympathy for Sarah. You said you worked through this process.
Yeah.
But at the end, you loved her as much as, you know, the character of Finding Neverland.
Well, yeah, oh yes, I did. I probably more so, actually, in the end. I mean, I think, Sarah has that extraordinary moment that sort of changes her life in an instant, where she loses her child. And she could be under a bus, she could be, she could have been taken, and that scene is so incredible, because you think, you're looking at Ronnie, you think, oh my God, last time we saw you had a knife, and the child's there, so something's going to happen to the child, and then lo and behold, you turn around, she's climbed out of the swing and she's gone to look at the flies in the street lamp. It's just heartbreaking. But in that moment, Sarah realizes how stupid she's been, she realizes how neglectful she's been as a mother, and also knows that in order to be happy now, she just has to be with her child. And you really do believe she's going to do that. And so that journey, that arc, to me was extraordinary. I'd never seen anything like that. And who Sarah is at the end of the film is completely different to who she is at the beginning. And that was absolutely clear on the page. It really was. And, that's some opportunity as an actor. It really is.
Well, it might all have been there on the page, and it might all have been to some extent in Todd Field's direction, but I think everyone here agrees with me that so much of the greatness of what we've just seen is a function of your talent, of your generosity.
Thank
and
you.
we thank you so much for being with us
Thank you very
tonight.
much. Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much.